You bring great evil with you.
A domain of evil it is.
You know, kiddo, you are a genius.
Hello, geniuses.
Okay.
You guys are some fucking evil geniuses.
You ever been to Los Angeles? Los Angeles, everybody wants to be star.
I love Los Angeles. I haven't been there, but I love it.
As we near the end of the 21-22 winter split, we prepare ourselves for the next LAN event, which will take place in Los Angeles. At this event, we're going to see 16 of the world's top teams compete at the international level. Looking over the field of teams, we see some obvious familiar faces, but we have some newcomers as well. As some lower end shuffling of the deck has occurred, especially in a strong European region, the supposed demise of Team Vitality seems to have finally taken hold, and Semper Esports had a pretty lackluster showing over the course of this split. With those two teams being out of the mix in this next LAN event, we have some newcomers on board. One of those two teams is the incendiary Team Queso, who has seemingly blown the metaphorical doors off of this European region. Having one of the strongest splits to date, Team Queso have really put themselves on the map as one of the true contenders we have going into this event. Fusing together the talents of three of the youngest strong talents that we have in the world is an impressive story in and of itself, but we're here today to talk about the other team that is joining the European region. That other team that we're going to be talking about is Evil Geniuses, who out of all of the teams in this field of competitors we have going to LA, has captured my heart and attention in a way that few others have. This seemingly cobbled together team of talent is really expressive and emotional and impassioned about their play, and they're honestly really fun to watch. With all three players on this team having pretty different play styles, but statistically finding themselves pretty even in most categories, this is a team that event after event I've found myself coming back to wanting to enjoy and see how they perform. Like with most great story arcs, Evil Genius's talent comes from pretty humble beginnings. Now finding themselves during our current season playing under the organization Evil Geniuses, this team in Season X was known as German Amigos, and even before then, the way that this team came together is really interesting. So let's just dive back for 1 second so we can have a better idea of how this team came together, and then we'll move back to present and look over some gameplay. So all three of these players kind of came together as this ragtag group from other pro teams that had a cup of coffee at the professional level, but never really reached the heights that they wanted to. Catalysm and Ivan came together under the moniker of KCI, and this was kind of a piecemealed effort from the remnants of the former Trainhard Esports roster. KCI was bounced in the closed qualifiers of a Season X event, and with them being eliminated from the tournament by the new and improved Trainhard Esports roster, enough was set for this team to decide to pivot and go a different direction. Ivan and Catalysm decided to bring in a third player who was RizX45, who was a journeyman in every sense of the word. RizX45 came on to join this duo, and this was his 12th professional team that he was joining. With this new trio created, they decided to change their name from KCI because the acronym no longer made sense, and they decided to play under the name German Amigos. This team found quick success, finishing second in the Season X Spring Grid behind Team BDS, and with that strong finish over the course of the grid, they put themselves on the map as a young and hungry team who was looking to improve on their results and really set a foothold within this European region. And as the current 21-22 season began, Evil Geniuses picked up this team, and just like that, one of the most recognizable old organizations re-entered the RLCS. So now with a little bit of history set in, let's talk about these players individually, and then we'll talk about how this team kind of is comprised offensively and defensively. So I feel like the first player that you have to talk about when talking about Evil Geniuses is Catalysm. With Catalysm being the most mechanically gifted of these players, he has quite a few tricks in his stable that he likes to go for. One of the most common is slowing the ball down for an air dribble, begging defenses to press him, and it gives him two great options. Either he can try and position advantageously for a 50-50 in the opposing box, Or if the defense waits, Catalysm has very crisp flip resets that he can put away as well. Ivan is the most radical of these players, flying around the field, pestering opposing defenses, and often putting away passes or rebounding shots from his teammates. On face cams, he's one of the most expressive players that I've seen, and really he's one of the true reasons that I decided to start following this team so closely. RizX45 is kind of the glue of this team in a lot of ways. He is a phenomenal passer, especially off the corner wall to put passes back into the middle. He positions well, especially in the midfield, and often finds himself in places to keep the play going or to slow down opposing offenses. And he's really reliable off the defensive back wall as well. Offensively, this team's bread and butter is really passing. While all three of these players do possess some level of solo playability, with Catalysm being the most obvious of the three, really this team doesn't rely on a lot of solo offense that you see from some other top teams. And in general, passing is really how this team's offensive engine keeps running. With all three members of this team being willing and able passers, EG's offensive tries and goals typically stem from stellar game sense and opting to set up a teammate instead of just taking a pop shot from deep or generally just turning the ball over. When EG finds a way to create pockets of space to pass, they can look stellar on offense. Many teams try this style, but they have their third men pushed too far up, and often making errant passes can lead to easy counter goals when you're pushed up so far. Evil Geniuses seems to nearly always make smart passes to open players and deliver them in a way that allows the receiver to continue progress with the ball instead of having to change course to catch or shoot the pass. This style can be inconsistent at times, and great passing typically requires multiple players being upfield with boost to make something happen. In the series they played against Dignitas, for example, we saw this playstyle not translate super well, with Dignitas doing a really good job of stealing Evil Genius's corner boosts and having their defensive backline pushed pretty far up to midfield. Evil Geniuses opted for a lot of boomer ball to try and clear the ball downfield. It limited their offensive chances to just a handful in a few different games. So on the defensive side of ball, EG does a really great job of limiting the amount of quality chances teams take against them. Per 5 minutes, they allow the third least goals per game behind defensive stalwarts in Luminosity and Team BDS. Evil Geniuses actually limits opposing scoring and score per game to one of the lowest metrics in EU. Now, as I was digging into those offensive and defensive stats, it led me to one of the most compelling elements of the Evil Geniuses playstyle. When looking over this team, it's fascinating to see how evenly they spread out their stats. Whether we're talking about saves, goals, assists, shooting percentage, all three of Evil Genius's players are basically tied in all of these statistical metrics. A lot of teams will see one player who is the clear statistical alpha on the team, but the diet of saves, shots, goals that we see Evil Geniuses deploy is really hard to play against. And I think this speaks in a lot of ways to their consistency, which is something we're going to talk about more in a second once we get to the major. But with all three of these players splitting up their stats so evenly, one player having an off day or intentionally trying to shut down a star player isn't really a viable option when you play this team. For example, if Catalysm has a game where he doesn't have a lot of touches, he's not really participating much, not scoring a lot of goals, that doesn't really derail Evil Geniuses in the same way that we would see Semper, for example, struggling if Archie wasn't performing well. And yes, Evil Genius's consistency isn't as impressive as some of the overwhelmingly great results we've seen from the other teams representing EU, but I don't think that the gap between the top teams and Evil Geniuses is as wide as a lot of people might think that it is on paper. For example, here is a list of the series wins and game wins between the 5 teams that will be representing EU at the next major event. If you remove the names, it's kind of hard to tell where Evil Geniuses falls, being basically tied with the other teams that will be competing. And now when you actually reveal who those teams are, it makes a little more sense when you talk about especially the game differential. EG plays series pretty evenly, and I think that speaks to their talent, but I think that translates pretty positively when we're looking forward to this major event. Certainly the strongest aspect of EG on paper has been their group stages. And we should know by now that at these LAN events, there's always some unknown factors and some unknown teams that are going to pop or underperform. So having a reputation of having a pretty consistent and strong group stage is something that Evil Geniuses should hang their hat on. And I know that that's difficult to do, especially when you look at the group that they're in. It's pretty difficult to not rank them as the third best team in this group. And even if you have them fourth, if you're a huge Sam fan, I can empathize with the argument. But when I actually do the exercise of going through and thinking about these matchups, I think there's a pretty strong argument for them to finish second. I think the first one that we should probably get out of the way is Team BDS. Team BDS played Evil Geniuses only one in the winter split. It was in the playoffs and they smacked Evil Geniuses pretty hard, but supplementing that with a little bit of copium, Evil Geniuses beat BDS pretty handily in the group stage of the fall split. So while I think the argument for beating that team is pretty difficult, I don't think that it's completely out of the question. The next strongest team in this group is pretty clearly G2. We don't have any previous data to really put this matchup into perspective, but we do have G2's previous performance in Sweden to look at. They had a pretty lackluster showing and they ultimately missed the playoffs. And yes, I know that this team has changed. Picking up Atomic in place of Dries clearly puts this team at a higher caliber than they were previously, but they kind of have to prove it at this event and show that they're one of the top teams in North America. And with their first matchup in group stages being against Evil Geniuses, all of the emotion and pressure will be on for this team to perform, and Evil Geniuses can kind of waltz into this series not having a ton of expectations on themselves. The other small added benefit is that we've seen time and time again, Evil Geniuses have been doing a lot of boot camping together, so this team knows what it's like to be in the same room together, how to feed off of that energy and kind of put a good product onto the pitch. So do I think that it is overwhelmingly likely that they will beat G2? No, but I do think that all of the factors are here for them to have the best chances of beating G2. And then Team Secret, I'm just going to go ahead and say I don't really feel like I'm equipped with enough knowledge to understand what this matchup is going to look like, but from what I've heard and from what I'm hearing from more informed talking heads like the guys at the Wave Dash podcast or Johnny Boy, for example, I feel pretty confident in saying that Evil Geniuses should beat Team Secret. So with that being said, there's a pretty good likelihood, in my opinion, that this team might finish second in the group. And is it absolutely unheard of for them to also beat BDS? No, certainly not, but I'm certainly not going to be betting any money on that. But what do I think is a reasonable outcome for this Evil Geniuses roster? I mean, obviously you hope that this is a team that at least makes the playoffs, and looking at the matchups that they could have, in my calculations, I think Space Station Gaming is a pretty likely first round playoff match. And look, that series in and of itself is hypothetical. Who knows if that's actually the matchup? And B, there's a lot of factors there that would change and alter my opinion on this. How is Daniel playing, for example? But in the efforts of trying to stay on Evil Geniuses and be concise, let's just say I don't think that it is unrealistic for this team to finish top 8 at this event. It's not unheard of. We just saw a team who on paper I think is a little bit weaker than this team, and Team Semper finish 4th at the Sweden LAN. So is Evil Geniuses being top 8 or potentially even higher absolutely unrealistic? I don't think so. But again, guys, these are just my opinions. I am really interested to hear what you guys think. On the last video that I did on Team Vitality, there was a ton of discourse on that, and I really appreciated everybody who watched that and took the time to comment on that video. So please let me know your opinions on Evil Geniuses. What do you expect from this team in this LAN event? What do you expect from them in the group stages? How far do you think that they're going to make it? I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say. But as always, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you next time.